In 1989, Goldman Sachs made $1.2 million a day in profit, top of Wall Street, the richest legitimate businessmen in America. Now picture this, a block in Washington, D.C., boarded up houses, broken street lights, kids playing on the sidewalk. That block made $2 million a day selling crack, twice what Goldman Sachs made. That block was called Hanover Place, and it wasn't even the only one. For most of the 20th century, black blocks in black neighborhoods generated more cash than Wall Street firms, more than banks, more than every legitimate black business in America combined. The kingpins running them got federal life sentences. The bankers running Wall Street got summer houses in the Hamptons. But the cash flow was on the black blocks. These are the 10 black blocks that beat Wall Street. Number 10. Lennox Avenue, Harlem, 1925. Casper Holstein was a Virgin Islands immigrant. He worked as a janitor on Wall Street. While he mopped floors, he watched the stock market. In 1923, he invented the modern numbers game using the daily stock exchange clearinghouse total. 3 numbers. Pick them. Bet a nickel. Win 600 to 1. By 1925, Casper Holstein was making $12,000 a day on Lennox Avenue in 1925 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that is approximately $220,000 per day in today's money. Per year, his operation grossed roughly $5 million in 1925 dollars. Over $90 million per year today, from one game on one avenue. Holstein did not keep all of it. He paid winners every day in cash. He funded the Harlem Renaissance. He paid for black college scholarships. He ran soup kitchens during the Depression. The Italian mob noticed. Dutch Schultz tried to take it by force in the 1930s. Stephanie St. Clair fought back. Bumpy Johnson took over after her. By the 1950s, Lennox Avenue was still moving over $1 million a week through its underground lottery. Lennox Avenue was the prototype. It proved that a single avenue in a poor black neighborhood could generate more cash than every legitimate black business in America combined. Number 9. Pulaski Houses, Brownsville, Brooklyn, 1985. The Pulaski Houses sit on the corner of Sutter Avenue and Pulaski Street. 6 14-story buildings of red brick, public housing, among the poorest census tracts in America at the time. This is where Mike Tyson grew up, the neighborhood that produced more world champion boxers per capita than any other neighborhood in American history. But by 1985, Brownsville had a different reputation. Brownsville was the largest open-air heroin market in Brooklyn. The Pulaski Houses sat at the center of it. A Brooklyn crew called the Avenue D Boys controlled the Pulaski territory. Their leader was Wayne Henry. The crew had over 80 soldiers. At its peak in 1985, the Pulaski Houses operation moved between $500,000 and $1 million per week. Annual revenue was $25 to $50 million from one housing project. Buyers came from across Brooklyn. Manhattan commuters drove in over the Brooklyn Bridge. Suburban customers came from Long Island. Some came from as far as New Jersey. The lines outside Pulaski at night were so long that the NYPD set up checkpoints in 1986 just to slow the traffic. It did not work. By 1988, the operation had expanded to crack cocaine and revenue doubled. The Avenue D Boys controlled the Pulaski territory until the federal RICO indictments of the early 1990s shut them down. Today, the Pulaski Houses are still standing. The drug operation is gone, but the neighborhood never recovered the way other parts of Brooklyn did. Brownsville is still one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City. The kids playing in the courtyard of Pulaski today have no idea their block once moved more cash per week than most Brooklyn banks held in deposits. South Jamaica, Queens, 1986. A small deli called Big Mac's sat on 159th Street between Sutphin Boulevard and 107th Avenue. Green awning, cooler full of drinks, counter selling lottery tickets. In the back room, Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols ran a $30 million a year crack operation. Fat Cat controlled every corner in South Jamaica between 1985 and 1988. He was moving 50 to 75 kilos of crack per week. That is $30 million in annual revenue. A typical mid-sized retail chain in Queens in 1986 generated $5 to $8 million a year. Fat Cat made 4 times that out of one deli. The block also fed 2 of the most violent men in New York history. Howard Pappy Mason was Fat Cat's enforcer. Kenneth Supreme McGriff worked the same blocks before launching the Supreme Team. When Fat Cat went to federal prison in 1988, his lieutenants kept the operation running. Even with him locked up, 159th Street continued to generate over $1 million per week. The deli is gone now. The block is gentrified. But in the late 1980s, it was the highest grossing single retail location in the entire borough of Queens. Number 7, 116th Street, Harlem, 1971. Frank Lucas walked down 116th Street with a paper bag full of cash. $100,000 in the bag. Profit from a single day. Frank Lucas ran the Country Boys organization. His distribution territory ran from 110th Street up through 130th Street. The flagship of his operation was 116th Street. Frank's innovation was simple. He flew to Bangkok and bought heroin straight from Asian suppliers. He cut the Italian mafia out of the supply chain. The savings were extraordinary. At its peak, Frank's organization generated approximately $1 million per day in revenue, $365 million a year from one stretch of Harlem. Frank wore a $250,000 chinchilla coat to the Ali Frazier fight in March 1971. The coat cost more than most American homes that year. The FBI noticed him in the coat. There followed a 5-year investigation. He was caught, convicted, he cooperated, and he walked out alive. He died broke in 2019. But for 5 years, from 1969 to 1974, 116th Street was the most profitable heroin retail location on the East Coast. Number 6, Hough neighborhood, Cleveland, 1968. Cleveland. The 1960s. Hough was a black neighborhood on the east side. It had been white in the 1950s and black after white flight. In 1966, the Hough riots devastated the neighborhood. Federal investigations later confirmed the fires had been set as part of a coordinated effort to clear the territory. The man who emerged as the most powerful figure in post-riot Hough was a numbers operator, Don King. Yes, that Don King. Before he wore the giant white hair and managed Muhammad Ali, Don King ran the Hough numbers. Federal court records put his weekly revenue at over $500,000 at peak. Per year, approximately $25 million in 1968 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, roughly $230 million per year today. From one Cleveland neighborhood, in 1966, Don King beat a man to death over a $600 gambling debt. He was convicted of manslaughter and served 4 years. When he came out, he transitioned from running numbers to managing fighters. He became one of the most powerful figures in American boxing. But before he managed Mike Tyson, before he managed Muhammad Ali, Don King ran a black Cleveland neighborhood that out-earned every legitimate business in the city. Number 5, 79th and Essex, Detroit, 1983. A 17-year-old named Milton Butch Jones stood on the corner of 79th and Essex. He had 30 of $50 bags of heroin in his pocket. He sold them in 2 hours. Butch Jones founded Young Boys Incorporated, called YBI. Their innovation was simple. They used children. Boys between 11 and 16 sold heroin and crack on Detroit corners. Kids could not be charged as adults. Kids worked cheaper. Kids were faster. By 1983, the YBI had over 300 child runners across Detroit. The flagship corner was 79th and Essex. That single corner moved $250,000 in heroin per day at peak. Per day. That is $91 million a year off one street corner sold by 11-year-olds. Federal prosecutors estimated the YBI's annual revenue at over $100 million during peak years. The entire city of Detroit's annual property tax revenue in 1983 was $380 million. The YBI generated a quarter of that, selling drugs through children on a few intersections. Butch Jones received a sentence of over 100 years in federal prison. Most of the children who worked for him are dead, locked up, or destroyed by addiction. The corner of 79th and Essex is still there. If you drive through Detroit's east side today, you can stand on the same sidewalk where 11-year-olds sold heroin packets to grown men in 1983. Number 4, Baisley Park, Jamaica, Queens, 1985. 2 miles south of Fat Cat in Jamaica, Queens. The Supreme Team, run by Kenneth Supreme McGriff and his nephew Gerald Prince Miller. The Supreme Team controlled the Baisley Park houses, 11 buildings on 12 acres, public housing. Federal indictments documented the numbers. Daily revenue at peak was $200,000 to $500,000. Annual revenue was $50 million to $100 million. Per building per day, the Supreme Team's crack operation generated more money than the average bank branch handled in deposits. The Supreme Team did not just sell crack, they organized the projects like a corporation. Rooftop lookouts with walkie-talkies on every building. Soldiers stationed at every entrance. Stash apartments rotated daily. Money pickups timed to the minute. A federal informant told the DEA the Supreme Team operated with the discipline of a Fortune 500 company and the violence of a Mexican cartel. Prince Miller was personally linked to over 20 murders during this period. The Supreme Team had a cultural footprint that outlived the empire. 50 Cent grew up in their shadow. Ja Rule worked with men connected to the organization. Irv Gotti named his record label Murder Inc., which allegedly received money laundered through Supreme. Between 1983 and 1990, those 11 buildings generated more money than the City of New York's entire road maintenance budget. Number 3, Overtown, Miami, 1985. Overtown sat just west of Biscayne Bay. Overtown had been a thriving black community in the 1950s and 60s. Black hotels, black nightclubs. Sam Cooke and James Brown played Overtown. By 1979, Overtown had been gutted. Highway construction had destroyed half the neighborhood. White flight collapsed the legitimate economy. Then in 1980, the Mariel boat lift brought 125,000 Cuban refugees to Miami. A small number were experienced criminal operators connected to Colombian cartels. They needed a black neighborhood to distribute through. Overtown was the closest, poorest, and most isolated. The Cubans partnered with local black operators. The result was an open-air drug market unlike anything America had ever seen. At peak in 1985, Overtown processed approximately $2 million in cocaine sales per day. $730 million per year. From one Miami neighborhood, black operators ran the street-level distribution. Cubans handled middle-tier supply. Colombians provided the source product. The black operators in Overtown made tens of millions per year. Most of them lasted less than 3 years before being killed by rivals or arrested. The Miami Vice cocaine economy that defined American pop culture in the 1980s was largely processed through Overtown. Today, Overtown is gentrifying. Luxury condos. The luxury condos rising over Biscayne Bay are partially funded by money that traces, through 5 decades of laundering, back to a few square blocks where black men sold cocaine to white tourists from South Beach. Number 2, 66th and Hoover, South Central Los Angeles, 1984. Los Angeles, 1984. Ricky Ross was running an empire so large, the federal government would later admit they had not believed it was possible. Freeway Rick. He grew up illiterate in South Central. He could not read or write at 18. By 21, he was running the largest crack cocaine operation in American history at street level. Freeway Rick's home base was the corner of 66th Street and South Hoover. From that single intersection, he supplied Crips territory across South Central, Bloods territory across South Central, Crews in St. Louis, Crews in New Orleans, Crews in Cincinnati, Crews in Memphis. Federal court records put his peak daily revenue at $3 million per day for 5 straight years between 1982 and 1987. That is over $1 billion in cumulative revenue from a single Los Angeles intersection. His connect was a Nicaraguan named Oscar Danilo Blandon. Federal investigations later confirmed Blandon was directly tied to the CIA-backed Contras in Nicaragua. The cocaine that flooded Los Angeles in the 1980s was at least partially funded by U.S. foreign policy operations in Central America. Freeway Rick was eventually caught and sentenced to life. His sentence was reduced after a 1996 San Jose Mercury News investigation revealed the CIA-Contra connection. He walked out of prison in 2009. The corner of 66th and Hoover is still there. If you walk it today, you will see corner stores, fast food restaurants, apartment buildings. What you will not see is a plaque marking the fact that this single intersection between 1982 and 1987 generated more cash flow than any legal business in the state of California. Hanover Place, Northeast Washington, D.C., 1988. If you parked at the corner of 1st Street and Hanover Place at 11 p.m. on a Friday, you would see a line of cars, white cars, black cars, SUVs, sedans, Volvos with Maryland plates, BMWs with Virginia plates, hundreds of them, wrapping around the block, idling in formation. The drivers were not waiting for a nightclub, they were waiting to buy crack. Hanover Place was the operation of Rayful Edmond. Rayful was 23 years old. His block was the largest open-air drug market in the United States. The DEA called Hanover Place the cocaine supermarket. Buyers drove in from Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, and West Virginia. Some came from Pennsylvania. They got in line, handed over cash, received product, and drove away. A purchase took 30 seconds. At peak, Hanover Place processed up to $2 million in cocaine sales per day, $730 million per year. Here is what $730 million per year compares to in 1988. The annual revenue of the entire U.S. Postal Service for the District of Columbia, $410 million. The annual operating budget of Howard University, $240 million. The combined annual revenue of every black-owned business in Washington, D.C., less than $200 million. Rayful Edmonds' single block generated more cash than every black-owned legitimate business in the nation's capital combined by a factor of 3. He employed over 150 people directly: lieutenants, runners, drivers, counters, lookouts. He paid them in cash, weekly, no taxes. He made $75 million personally between 1985 and 1989. He spent it on Mercedes, Rolex watches, and front-row seats at every Georgetown basketball game. He partied with Patrick Ewing. He partied with Alonzo Mourning. He partied with NBA stars, rappers, and politicians. In April 1989, Rayful was arrested by federal agents. His trial in 1990 became the largest federal drug trial in American history at the time. Witnesses testified behind bulletproof glass. He was convicted on multiple federal counts and sentenced to life in federal prison. He was 26 years old. Hanover Place was raided, demolished, and rebuilt. Today, Hanover Place is a quiet residential street. Most of the original houses are gone. The neighborhood is gentrifying. Young professionals walk dogs on the same sidewalks where lines of luxury cars waited to buy cocaine in 1988. But for 4 years, this single Washington, D.C. block was the highest grossing illegal retail location in American history. The #1 black block that beat Wall Street, Hanover Place. In the 20th century, Wall Street made America believe the richest people in the country worked on the New York Stock Exchange. That was a lie. The real money was on black blocks Wall Street had abandoned. Hanover Place, 66th and Hoover, Overtown. Baisley Park, 79th and Essex, Hough, 116th Street, 159th Street, Pulaski Houses, and Lennox Avenue. 10 blocks, 10 black neighborhoods, combined daily revenue at peak, roughly $12 million. More than the daily profit of the largest American banks in the 1980s. Generated entirely by black men in black neighborhoods with no Wall Street firm, no investor, and no Federal Reserve loan. The men running these blocks were business operators. They had supply chains. They had distribution networks. They had logistics. They had hierarchy. They had quality control. They built sophisticated commercial operations under conditions where every police officer, every federal agent, and every rival crew was actively trying to kill them. If any one of them had been white, born in Connecticut, gone to Yale, they would have founded Fortune 500 companies. Instead, they were black, born in housing projects, unable to get bank loans. So they sold heroin, they sold crack, they ran numbers, and they generated more cash flow than Wall Street. For 1 century on those 10 blocks, the actual capital of American capitalism was not on Wall Street. It was on a few square blocks in Northeast D.C., South Central Los Angeles, Detroit's East Side, Jamaica, Queens, the Baisley Park houses, Cleveland's Hough neighborhood, Frank Lucas's 116th Street, Casper Holstein's Lennox Avenue, Brownsville's Pulaski Houses, and Miami's Overtown. The men running those blocks did not ring closing bells. They counted cash on living room floors at 3 in the morning. They did not get summer houses in the Hamptons. They got federal life sentences. But for 1 century on those 10 blocks, black men made more money than any banker in America. That is the truth. Wall Street will never put in a textbook. Most of these blocks no longer exist as they did. Hanover Place is gentrifying. 66th and Hoover is being eaten by gentrification from downtown Los Angeles. Overtown is now under luxury condos. Baisley Park still stands, but the Supreme team is gone. 79th and Essex is still selling drugs, but in fragments with no Butch Jones at the top. Hough has collapsed into one of the poorest neighborhoods in America. 116th Street is part of the new Harlem of Whole Foods and Equinox gyms. 159th Street is mostly demolished or converted. Pulaski Houses are still standing, but Brownsville has never recovered. Lennox Avenue is an Apple store, a Starbucks, and a Whole Foods. The men who built these empires did not pass anything on to the neighborhoods that made them rich. Most of the cash they generated went into white-owned banks, white-owned real estate, white-owned car dealerships, and white-owned jewelry stores. The drug economy of the 1980s was the largest transfer of wealth from black communities to white owners in American economic history. 10 blocks generated tens of billions of dollars over 5 decades. Almost none of it stayed in the neighborhoods where it was made. Casper Holstein died broke in 1944. Frank Lucas died broke in 2019. Rayful Edmond is in federal prison. Freeway Rick is broke and rebuilding from a one-bedroom apartment. Don King is the only one of these 10 figures who walked away with generational wealth, and he did it by leaving the streets. The blocks made the money. The blocks did not keep the money. That is the final lesson. You can run the largest drug operation in American history. You can move more cash through your block than Goldman Sachs moves through its trading floor. You can make $730 million a year selling crack to suburban commuters. And in the end, your block will still get demolished.